John 8:44 is taken out of its historical context to claim that Jews are not the true children of Abraham and even God because of their unbelief in Christ, and hence God is finished with the nation of Israel as a covenantal entity. In the verse, Jesus says to the Jewish religious leaders, "Ye are of your father, the devil." The context is Jesus' heated exchange with his critics and opponents in Jerusalem, the Jewish religious leaders who do not believe in him and were challenging his authority and seeking to kill him for some time. The focus of Jesus' criticism is spiritual. He condemns the religious leaders bluntly for their spiritual state in rejecting him and for their violent, deceptive, and hypocritical actions as they continue to resist his preaching and were leading their people to hell. Jesus' opponents claimed that they are children of Abraham and God because of their lineage. Jesus rebukes them that Abraham's children would follow in his footsteps in believing in God and obeying God's truth even when they do not understand. Thus, Jesus condemns them that they are not the spiritual children of God, but that their true spiritual father is Satan. The context is historical and the audience specific. Jesus did not condemn them because of their ethnicity, but because of their rebellion and opposition to God's truth. They were specific hostile Jewish leaders and their followers, and it was an intense theological dispute over Jesus' claims of divinity, Sabbath healing, and authority. Scholars say the language was rhetorical, typical of the strong polemics common in intra Jewish disputes of the time, and that misinterpreting Jesus' words as a blanket condemnation of all Jews across all times is an abuse of the text's original meaning and historical context. Jesus is basically contrasting those who accept God's truth with those who reject it with the language of spiritual fatherhood. Jesus calls Peter Satan because Peter's words reflected human concerns and not God's. Jesus calls Judas the devil for his unbelief and malicious actions. Clearly, since the religious leaders assumed that being Abraham's children is enough to be God's children, Jesus condemns them since Satan is the spiritual father of all who reject Christ, in Jesus' own words. If Jesus were to speak to every group of non Christians, he would condemn them in a similar fashion for not believing in him. In the parable of the weeds, Jesus in fact calls all who reject him children of the evil one. Christians who demonize all Jews forget that salvation is from the Jews and that the first disciples were Jews and salvation is first for the Jew, which emphasizes Israel's special role in God's covenant of salvation. Why would Jesus call his physical people children of Satan when God declares his everlasting love for his chosen people again and again, even through their disobedience, and calls them apple of his eye? Why would Paul declare that Israel is beloved to God even in unbelief? How does it make sense that they are God's chosen people for the sake of the church and also children of Satan? Does not Paul warn Gentile Christians not to be arrogant, boastful, and not consider themselves superior to Israel so that they are not cut off from God's grace? Know if synagogue of Satan really are Jews and remember to be a Berean.